All right, that is a wrap on Saturday basketball officiating. Today I had two very different types of games, yet they were both kids' games. The first set this morning was an AAU or Amateur Athletic Union or a club-affiliated game where the parents pay the coaches to coach and to take their kids on tours of games. And then the game I just finished, the three I just finished, were recreation, parks and rec games. So these are very different animals. A park and rec game, basically you have volunteer parents coaching, and you have kids playing the game who are not really basketball players. They're kids who play basketball. There's a difference. In this morning's game, you had probably half the guys were, I'd say, basketball players. Like, it was important to them, and they played a lot of basketball and wanted to get good. These three games this afternoon, there were none. I don't think there was really one kid in there who played basketball more than just what an adult organized. So, laying those scenarios out for you, which do you think would be more difficult for us as referees? The fairly competitive amateur style basketball or the park and rec? Which is more difficult? Well, let me tell you, the worse the quality of the game, the more difficult it is to referee. As I said before, most games referee themselves. A few calls here and there in high school varsity, we have to really work and be in position on. Most things are obvious. In park and rec, it's difficult because the games are really sloppy a lot of times, and there's a lot of contact and a lot of things going on. The perceptions of our roles in a park and rec versus an amateur athletic union or an amateur game, I think is very different. I think you have kind of a commercial perception of us at a recreation game. In other words, most of the people there, including the coaches, players, fans, aren't really basketball people. Their perceptions of referees are mostly not positive ones. What we are and who we are and what we do, they get from the television for the most part. So they have a very novice understanding of the game. Now in the amateur game, you're going to get a coach probably who knows a little bit about basketball and understands that things are pretty fair for the most part, and that the referees you're gonna kind of let the referees referee, and then you're gonna put your advice in there when you see something. Now the rec games I just did, they just assume we're not good, that we're villains and we're incompetent. Even if you look competent, they don't even know, for the most part, what competence is. They're not even looking at perceived competence. So I walked into the gym, and this fellow official was talking to, obviously, a parent who was coaching the previous game. And I heard the coach say to the official, "Every time I come here, it's just not fair." And so I interjected. I stepped in and I said, "Excuse me, can you tell me, why do you think it's unfair?" And he really didn't answer my question. He just felt that every time he was coming to this gym, his team was getting screwed. Now in the first game I was refereeing in this gym, the coach had a complaint about something and said, "I just want it called both ways." And I said, "Coach, don't say that." "Well, but that's what I want," he says. I said, "Look, what you're insinuating there is that we are biased, that we are judgmental. We are calling one thing at one end and we're biased against one team. That drives me nuts, to be honest. It drives me nuts when people say, call them both ways or be fair, because that insinuates that we are partisan, which is anything. We are nothing if not partisan or bipartisan. We don't care. We're there to referee. We're there to do our job. We don't care who's doing what. So I tried to talk to the coach to say, look, you asked me a question about something that's going on. Just don't make that insinuation that I'm partisan. He didn't even understand that calling both ways was a sale on our partisanship, on our ability to referee fairly. So hopefully he understood that. Now, as I talked to him, there was a grandfather in the stands that said, "Are you blind? That was a travel." And he pointed to his eye. And I looked up and he stared right at me. It was 5 feet from him. "Are you blind?" And he pointed right at his. I mean, this dude was serious. This was a grandfather. So what you get in these games are parents and family members who are living vicariously through their children or their grandchildren. And so when their kid falls down, they feel bad. When their kid misses a shot, they feel bad. When their kid is unhappy, they're unhappy. So what you get in these rec games is these parents who can't separate their own emotions from their emotions of their child. And if their child is not feeling good, then somebody has to be blamed. This is learning vicariously or vicarious experience. It's an old one. Old social post. It's just people live through their children. So what you get in these rec games are parents and grandparents and people who really don't understand the game. But we're villains. We don't know what we're doing. We're incompetent. So we had to do a lot of game management today. And I tried to talk to him, be as personable as possible. This is where you actually learn how not to let your heart rate and let your emotions get going, because you must do the opposite in these situations. You cannot inflame the situation. You've got to calm everything down. You've got to be even in your emotional approach to talking to people and try to be as proactive as you can. I even switched with my partner and said, look, let me go talk to this coach while you shoot free throws. And that's when I addressed this guy about calling him both ways. So, and then he was pretty good after that. Now, what also happens in these games is, even though I had a partner who was experienced, who was perceptually competent, he's a competent official, I've worked with him before, he's a little black and white, a little nitpicky, but generally pretty good official and does varsity games. Well, he was swayed emotionally by the emotion of the crowd and by the emotion of the coach. So he started tightening things up with his calls. The thing that you have to understand, and people have to understand, that basketball is a contact sport. There is going to be contact. It is assumed. At the recreational level, they do not understand the contact's part of the game, and they assume because there's contact that the call should be made. So my partner got sucked into that a little bit. And then what he did is he went outside his primary area and made some calls in front of me, because he was fearful of the retribution or what was coming from the parent or the coaches. And this is a no-no. But it's understandable how it does happen, because you're fearful of being criticized. So that's why I encourage people to referee a lot of basketball games, because you have to work through this kind of problem. You have to referee through the perceptions that are going on with coaches, fans, and players. You cannot change how you referee because you're afraid of criticism from one side or the other. And it's ironic that the best place to learn that is rec games, because you'll deal with people in the stands, people, coaches that really don't understand. And remember, when you're a recreational player, that means you're not experienced, and so you are not really comfortable out there. So a lot more kids are falling down, a lot more kids are crying. There's a lot more quote-unquote injuries, which are basically I'm tired or I'm embarrassed kind of things, rather than I'm really injured. So we had some of that today. And it's important that you maintain your objectivity throughout this, but I'll say it's not easy to do. So you may think that the competitive game, the AAU kind of game, is more difficult to referee, but the truth of the matter, the rec game can be much more challenging because of the game management, managing the personalities, managing the people. So that's why I encourage you get out there and you get in some of these rec games, and there's a whole bunch going on that's ugly, and you got parents that are upset because it's ugly, and you got to referee through that without contributing to the ugliness by being short with your emotions or short with the rope that you give the coaches or players, and start throwing tees and kicking people out, because that does nobody any good. You've got to referee through that by communicating to everybody involved. Now, that being said, this is a kid's game, and everybody wants sportsmanship, right? We all preach sportsmanship, and so I'm very intolerant of overt criticism coming from the stands. Well, and coaches too. I'll take a lot more from players because they're playing and they're invested. But coaches and people in the stands, I will nip it in the bud, because if you allow people in the stands to overtly criticize you, then the coaches feel compelled, or they got to do something, right, to show they're fighting for their team. Then they start criticizing. So I will look into the stands when I hear that, just like the guy that pointed to his eye and are you blind? Because that what I call contaminates the environment at the game. So I do not allow people in the stands to overtly criticize the officials, because it filters out to everybody else that's part of the competition. So the guy about he didn't say anything the rest of the day, so he wasn't guilty as far as trying to drum up some animosity toward us. If he had been, I was going to throw him out pretty quick. But I let it go, and so did he. And that's what you look for. So when you make some kind of suggestion or a demand from to a coach or a player or a fan, and you demand their proper decorum or proper behavior, and they don't do it, then you got to act. So thankfully, that did not happen today. We got out of there in pretty good shape, and I'm tired. My knee is a little sore just from standing for 6 hours. It's a pretty good payday. Ironically, the recreation games pay more than the AAU games. But you put up with more, and more is going on. You would think the better the game, the more you get, but it doesn't work that way. So anyway, we got out of there. It's time to go home. Time to take the dog out. Mookie's not with me today, and time to have a little rye bourbon. So happy Saturday night, and we will see you all soon.